And just in terms of key risks at this point in the cycle, what's the stuff that makes you nervous in relation to these maybe income replacements or even straight sort of fixed interest and cash segments at the moment?
Look, from my perspective, I think one of the dangers lurking in the current pricing is that we're pricing a lot of these income products ahead of the current rates that we're seeing. So we're already pricing it on the next cut, and we're already pricing it potentially on the next 2 cuts. We've seen historically things rarely play out as we predict, and therefore, think about the sensitivity of that valuation to, a readjustment of those interest rate assumptions. And from my perspective, that does concern me. Maybe things aren't as bad as we think they are, and maybe we're not going to get 2 cuts. And then how do these income products reprice themselves to the new assumptions? And obviously after that, you've got these global issues. You see overnight the China trade war risks and what have you as well, the Brexit risk potentially as well. So, there's numerous risks. But from my perspective, looking at how we often price ahead of where we currently are, that's a key risk.
Tim, anything keeping you awake at night?
Look, I think, as well documented, all the global risks. Many people do focus on them and talk a lot about them. I think, you've got to sort of separate the structural from the cyclical. And I think the thing we all grasp with, and we hear at Hub 24, is just the impact technology is having structurally. We spend a lot of time thinking about that because it's those structural things which are going to catch you out. Cyclically, I think, Australia is going through a slowdown which we will come out of, not like we have from past slowdowns. Inflation, which is very low at the moment, that's predominantly a housing story. So once housing turns, and that is probably a couple of years away, that will bring some inflation back into the system. So you want to separate the things which are cyclical and that you should sort of look as an opportunity, and the things which are structural, which you really have to get your head around. You don't want to be stuck in certain investments which are just are going to be knocked around. And the thing about technology, and I feel, as I said, coming to a place like yours, you're better able to talk about it, but is just I think the potential is going to accelerate. And we all feel like the last 10 years have been one hell of a ride, but I suspect the next 10 years will be even more change. And you've really got to stay on top of that, because that will determine what the winners and losers are. Not just within technology stocks, but within the wider range. And interest rates as well.
Okay, Dan?
Well, I think one of the key risks is obviously, we've sort of mentioned the asset valuation has been at the higher end of historical ranges, and I guess one of the key risks in the market is that sort of the monetary policy and the shift that can happen in such a short period of time. I mean, in December quarter last year, the market was expecting the Fed to have a rate hike in 2019, and that's reversed quite sharply over a space of 3 months. So under that scenario, there will be quite a lot of volatility coming into the market. The interest rates are sort of playing havoc with valuations at the moment, and I guess you have to sort of be really nimble and make sure that diversification is a key part of the portfolio construction process, to be able to sort of ride through and smooth out the returns under such a scenario.
So we have historical low bond yields, cash rates. They are generally supportive of equity valuations, or where prices currently sit, probably directly attributable to where they sit at the moment. Now, in terms of looking at the search for above yield or above average yield, over the past year there's been a lot of demand for obviously high yielding products. Do you think we face an issue in terms of good quality companies being overvalued as a result of that? Are we going to be forced down through the risk spectrum to actually, people's expectations don't shift, or to actually achieve those same yields?
Look, I think valuation in part it's a subjective issue. It's really sensitive to the assumptions that you use for your long-term interest rates. Now, if we use anywhere near the long-term assumptions that have been used in models for the risk-free rate, obviously the market is quite expensive in a lot of areas. But at the same time, if you use the spot risk-free rate for the 10-year bond yields, they're actually not expensive at all. Now, how realistic that is in terms of actually using the spot rate for the risk-free rate for the long term is another question. But I guess the longer interest rates remain where they are, we're likely to have these valuations supported in the market. I mean, for example, you've got a company with the same company with the exact identical cash flows, and if you, depending on what risk-free rate you use to value that business, you can have valuation variance of 20 to 30% plus or minus. And that's what the market is sort of wrestling with at the moment in terms of you've got these businesses that have sort of long duration growth and they're being discounted at gradually lower rates and that's supportive of valuations.
Sure.
So I guess in terms of it's a balance of selecting the right businesses to invest in and at the same time being aware that the assumptions for interest rates and an outlook for monetary policy is a key input of the valuation for these businesses long term, and we could see sort of quite remarkable changes in valuations in a very short period of time, and that's where you sort of fall back on your portfolio and the type and the quality of businesses that you're investing in to make sure that they can sort of work through the cycle.
Any views on quality being oversold or overbought, I should say?
Look, I think, again, I agree with Dan, like, as long as rates are low, you've got a huge tailwind behind asset prices across the board. But then getting to Tim's point before about at this point of the cycle, it's hard not to be increasingly cautious about some of these valuations, particularly when you look at some of the subordinated products in the fixed income market relative to the investment grade space. So that's kind of our view.
Yeah, look, I agree about this. The discount factor you use is very important. But you've got to remember the whole point of low rates is that we have, firstly, low inflation. That's the good side behind it. You don't want low inflation to tip over to deflation, but as long as inflation is low, that's a tailwind for everything. But the second thing is that, part of the reason we've got here, apart from low inflation, is there's a global surplus of savings. In other words, globally, there's a lot of savings looking for a home, which is driving this down. And that's also structural, that's not about to change.
Sure.
So if you're a saver, unfortunately, you're not in demand anymore. If you're an investor, you are. And that's the whole point of low rates, is to encourage more investment. So people with entrepreneurs and those sorts of people, better access to money is a good thing for the economy. Unfortunately, though, if you're a saver, you're not needed as much, and that's reflected in the low rates. And again, that's not about to change. You may get some small variances, but that's not about to change.